Hey guys, well, it's back again, and for another well, for another live stream for you all. And I hope you all are enjoying your weekend, and hope you all are pleased to see me again doing another live stream. Today is I am going to be doing nothing but reactions for you all today, and also to give you an update on past sins. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic past sins. I'm going to continue doing it. I'm going to be continuing to do it next week. Starting, you know how I sometimes do my reaction of my reactions at night. So I'll do it Sunday night, and hopefully it'll be uploaded Monday night, Monday afternoon. So just to let you know, and I also hope you all enjoyed part 1 of Sonic and Shadow and Equestria, episode 2, Shadow versus Rare Fruit. I hope you all enjoyed the part 1 of that, and part 2 will be coming out very soon. I'll be starting that also on Sunday as well. So and you guys know what's going on, and I hope you all will enjoy it, and I hope you all will enjoy this reaction video what I'm going to be doing for you guys. So so yeah, that's pretty much it. And also, guys, I hope you all, like I said, I hope you all are doing well. I hope you all are ready for the weekend, and I hope you all are going to enjoy my upcoming series that I'll be my upcoming videos that will be coming out. So yeah. So that's pretty much it. And so right now, guys, I'll be doing a video and doing some reaction videos. And this one is a very good one, actually. For the start, I'll be doing a really old show. I'll be right into a really old show I used to watch. It used to be on ABC Family Channel. It was called Whose Lines It Anyway? Whose Lines It Anyway was a really good show. It had stars like Drew Carey, Colin Mockery, Wayne Brady, Ryan Stiles, and some other people. So I hope you all will enjoy this, and I know that, and I hope you all will enjoy my reaction video, my live stream today. And if there's any other, if you have questions, don't forget to you can just ask. We can chat if you want to, just like that. So anyway, guys, let's get started. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, hold on, guys. It's a hold on, guys. Sorry. Sorry, guys. It's just the commercial. Sorry, guys. You know those ads. It's ridiculous.
I found a girl who loved it. I found a girl who liked my car. Her name was Mesa. She didn't run very far. She wanted to be in it. She loved the leather. And that's when I married her. She took her thumb off in any weather. Oh, but I love her. I love her just the same. I love her to death, you see. I am really game. And she loves me. We'll never ever part. I'll probably die with her. And then we both will fight. She forgave me. Now we're married. She can almost walk now. Boy, we are not harried. It's a day we'll never forget. We will not. And every night we drive, she has gravel in her snot. Oh, Sometimes I still think of her when I'm all alone. When I'm sitting in my cell, gnawing on a red bone. I think her name was Susan, or maybe it was Jan. Whatever her name was, she was a man. Oh, I wish those berries were never gone. I understand. I wish that as well. My life didn't go as planned, but things didn't turn out as I planned. I became a rock fucker, and that I changed, became a man. To get a job now, because I am busted. I won't be a bum, you see, cause my place is dusted. I'm going to look tomorrow, because I am smart. And when I meet the boss man, I'll rip out his heart. Oh, I'm a very handsome man. The ladies love my paint. They think that I'm Tom Selleck. They think I'm really great. Oh, people cheer and yell when my head walks through a door. And when I come into the room, my pants fall on the floor. I slapped him on the butt there, and then I slapped his head. And when I slapped his bottom, I slapped the doctor instead. I called my boy Roy. He looked good. And when I got him home that night, you can get poo from food. Great job now. Now I can drive a truck because I'm a truck driver and I transport.
Some of these are a little bit lower than others.
Making lots of cash, making lots of ducats, sitting on my ass. I've lost track of the story. I don't know what has happened. He wrote me a letter. My underwear is snapping. I think there was a girl involved. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know what to say. Meow. I really need a job now. I look in the paper, but I can't never find nothing. I have a scraper, but I'll keep on looking. I look until I can see. If you want someone who's nuts, be a host on TV. All arranged now, and then I'll hug them, and then I'll say you lovely. I'll never, never bug them. I'll give them all my cars. I'll let them sleep in my beds, cause I'm the greatest boss there is. I'll rub Colin's head. Oh, now I'm all alone, and Joe is long gone, and so I'll read my diary. I'll just sing the song, but that's the way I like it. I like being alone. Oh, sure, sometimes I miss him. Joe had a nice bone.
So had a nice bone.
His glasses are kind of funny, and people think they're fake, especially these glasses. He is quite a rake. Oh, but he's a very good guy now, and he has telepathic powers, and he can fly through the airplane. He's worn a thong for hours. my look now. Look, I'm so hairy. I've got hair upon me back. Oh, don't be wary. I think I'll stay this way forever and a day. Maybe I will grow a beard. I'll comb it over, hey? Oh, people think I'm strange now. People think I'm weird. People think I'm funny. But I'm not a beard. I don't care what people say. I'll dance and sing all day. I'll redecorate. I'm gay. Oh,
Oh, come on. Sorry, guys. I got it.
And now I'm world famous. Everyone knows my name. They all say he's a comin'. My passing gas is my fame. I'll live on in history. What is a guy to do when you are famous like me? Oops, I pooed. I still hear from him. From often. He writes a little letter. It's as soft as cotton. Someday I'll write back. He is my best friend. And now we both are pen pals. He put my stone back in my hand. Today I just got laid off. Oh, good gracious.
Congratulations, a far memory!
I have to go to a new place. I have to find a new job. What will I do?
I'll get the beer, nuzzle knob!
There's blood in my stool.
Oh my gosh. There's oh man. Colin is a master of of the Irish drinking song. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. No, I mean he's always the last one to do the thing. And then he comes up with something special. And then he makes everybody just almost break out almost every single time. They almost like break out in laughter almost every single time, and then it's hilarious. Okay, guys. Next up, I'm going to be doing reacting to Mr. Ballin, and it is top 3 places you cannot go. All right, and this one is recent. I think it's like 6 days ago. I think six days ago. I think. Let's see.
Today we're going to look at.
6 days ago. Sorry, I had to press it and get the video going to see if it was 6 days ago. This was made. All right, here we go.
Today we're going to look at 3 places you can't go and people who went there anyways. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's an interest to you, please sneak into the Like Button's Doomsday Bunker and remove all the labels on their canned goods so they have no idea what they're eating. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
One for the road, number 3.
Late on the night of Friday, September 18th, 2015, a 45-year-old man named Lattori Barman stumbled down a pitch-black street in a small village in central India. Lattori was stumbling because he was very, very drunk.
He and his wife had spent most of the night together out at this local fair, having loads to drink and partying. And then at some point, his wife had actually broken off and gone to her parents' house in another village. But Lattori had decided to stay out and keep the fun rolling. And so once she was gone, Lattori had gone to a liquor store and had more to drink there. And then now he had finally decided he had had enough. He was extremely intoxicated and he just wanted to get back home. And so as Lattori stumbled down this road, he could really only see maybe a foot in front of him, not only because he was so drunk, but also because the streets in his village did not have lights. And so it was totally dark. However, this wasn't unusual for Lattori. I mean, this is where he lived. He'd walked the street many, many times and knew how to navigate without any lighting. And so he just continued walking along, business as usual. But what did strike him as odd is that, late at night here, as he's making his way home, he thought it was weird that there was a lot of people out on the road. He couldn't really see them because, again, there's no lighting, but he could definitely hear them. Like there was people sort of all over the place. And he also sort of in his intoxicated state saw some lights that, maybe were vehicles sort of moving around. So there was like more activity on this road than usual. But at the same time, like this is a main road and sometimes there's lots of people and cars on it, even late at night. Yeah. So this didn't really strike him as odd enough to stop and investigate. He just kept on walking towards his house. But as he's walking through with all this commotion all around him, at some point he goes to step, but instead of his foot striking the ground again, there's nothing there. And suddenly he feels himself falling and he smashes into the ground. And now truly it's pitch black. He can't see anything. And he blacks out. The following morning, a group of villagers were walking down the same street that Lattori had been on the night before. And as they were walking, now in broad daylight, they looked up ahead and they noticed something odd right in the middle of the street. And at first they had no idea what it was. And so they walked closer to it to get a better look. And as they walked up on this thing, they instantly understood what it was. And they screamed and ran to tell authorities. It would turn out the reason Lattori was hearing and seeing all these people and vehicles on the street the night before, which seemed sort of out of place, was because there was actually a construction crew repairing potholes in that road. This road was known for being very dangerous because of these deep potholes. And Lattori, as he was stumbling along, accidentally fell into one of these deep potholes, smashed the ground, and was knocked unconscious.
Oh, God.
And because this worksite was so chaotic and there was all this, movement and there was bad lighting, none of the crew saw Lattori fall in. And Lattori, even after, coming to inside the hole, was too drunk to get out of the hole. And so at some point that night, the construction crew reached the pothole that Lattori was in.
Oh, God, no.
They didn't see him, and they poured molten tar into the hole and then rolled over it with a roller, all with Lattori inside the hole. And so after they were done and moved on to the next pothole, Lattori, in his final moments, tried to kind of pull himself out of this tar, but he only managed to get his hand up and out of the tar. And so the next day, the group of villagers that walked down the road, what did they see? They saw Lattori's hand poking out of the ground. Lattori's body was removed from the street and he was given a proper burial. There were 2 construction workers who were on duty on the night of Lattori's death, who were ultimately arrested and charged with culpable homicide. As for Lattori's family, authorities would give them a compensation payment for Lattori's death, but it was only worth approximately $760 US.
What? Oh, come on. You paid more than that.
Look, Dr. Squat's natural body wash. Didn't he sweet?
Sorry, guys. More
Last year, we launched a brand new podcast here at Ballin Studios called Redacted, Declassified Mysteries with Luke LaManna. And so far,
I'm stopping it for right now. Oh, my God. Can you imagine falling into a pothole and having molten concrete, molten cement, molten tar on you? Oh my God. Can you imagine? Oh, Jesus.
Guys have loved it. And in case you haven't heard, we also launched a YouTube channel for Redacted, where you can not only listen to these episodes, but also watch the beautiful animations we've done for each of these episodes. That channel already has 150,000 subscribers and it's growing really quickly. And there are hours of content available right now for you to binge. New uploads to this YouTube channel will be every single Tuesday. All you have to do is look up @Redacted Mysteries on YouTube, and I'll also be putting a link in the description below. Wondery Plus subscribers can also watch Redacted on the Wondery app. Okay, back to the stories.
He Rises, number 2. Okay.
Around 2:30 p.m. on November 28, 2015, a man pulled into his driveway in the extremely rural city of Huron, California. He'd been away overnight, and so as soon as he got out of his car, he walked right up to his porch and checked his doorknob to make sure his door was still locked. He found that it was, which was a relief. Then he unlocked it and stepped inside. However, as soon as he was inside his house, he just stopped and listened and kind of looked around. So this neighborhood that he lived in was not a safe place to live. In fact, over the past year, this guy's house had been broken into multiple times. However, he had not reported any of these break-ins to the police because he himself was wanted for felony drug possession. And so instead of getting the police involved, the man had sort of begun doing his own home security. Basically, every time he came home, he would sort of take a minute, listen, make sure nobody was in the house, and then actually sweep the house to make sure, nobody was there and that nothing had been stolen. And so as the man stood there in his doorway listening, he couldn't hear anything and nothing looked disturbed inside of his house. So he flipped on the lights, he walked into his living room and put his keys and his wallet down. And then he began doing this kind of systematic sweep through his house, checking to make sure there was nothing wrong. Check the windows, none were broken, goes to the back door, it's still locked. He's in his kitchen, he's in, his dining room, there's nothing out of place. He did notice, however, that his mail that was sitting on one of his tables looked like maybe it had been rummaged through, but at the same time, he couldn't remember if maybe he had been kind of sloppy when he had gone over his mail before he had left the night before. So he didn't know if the mail was a sign of a break-in, but it didn't seem like it. And so after completing his sweep and feeling confident that the house was, in good order, he sat down and he relaxed. And he felt like, it had been a while since the last break-in, and maybe he was being a bit too paranoid. But for now, he decided, his security protocol was good enough, and he wouldn't make any changes quite yet. And he just picked up the remote, turned on the TV, and settled in for the night. However, after only a couple of minutes, the man realized his house was pretty cold, and he was starting to shiver. So he stood up, and he walked over, and he turned on his heat. Then he sat back down on his couch. Then, about a minute later, this awful, high-pitched scream ripped through the house. It would turn out the homeowner's paranoia around break-ins was totally justified, because the night before, while he was gone, someone had tried to break into his home. 19-year-old Cody Caldwell had snuck onto the roof and attempted to enter this man's house through the chimney. But he got stuck about halfway down. And when the man came home and did his safety patrol and checked his house and couldn't hear or see anything, what he didn't realize was Cody was still absolutely stuck in the chimney and alive. He just wasn't making any sound. And then when the homeowner got cold and turned on the heat, what he literally did was he started an actual fire in his fireplace. And after setting this fire, Cody, who's wedged in the chimney right above this fire, began breathing in the smoke, and in his panic, he began to wiggle around and sink further and further down into this chimney, which is angled, and so he would have gotten more and more stuck until he was basically in the fire and then caught on fire. That scream was him burning alive inside of the chimney. And the man who owned the house had no idea what was going on. He just heard these screams. And then finally, when he got the fire put out and he called the police and the first responders showed up, it was already too late because Cody had died from severe burns and smoke inhalation.
Jesus. What idiot. What an idiot.
What's your favorite app?
Instagram, X Shorts.
What's that?
It is an underrated app. There is no boundaries, no censorship.
Sorry, guys. I don't know what to do about that. Man alive.
On the evening of January 19th, 2022, a 40-year-old mother named Anna Uskova set up a camera and some lights at the edge of a clearing in the woods in St. Petersburg, Russia. Then she focused the camera on the spot in the clearing where she, her husband, and her children were about to perform a very important religious ceremony. So to set the scene here, it was late at night, so it's dark, it was snowing, it's totally freezing. This is the dead of winter out in the middle of Russia. This is a cold, cold environment, but this is when this ceremony was done, in the dead of winter, all over Russia. This was not just something Anna's family was doing. This is like a Russian thing. On this day, all over the country, people would perform this sort of purification ritual that was designed to revitalize their bodies and souls and help them ward off evil spirits for the new year. Now, typically, Anna and her family would perform this big ceremony in a group setting with their church. But this year, Anna decided she wanted to hold this ceremony privately with just her family kind of out in the woods by themselves. It would be more intimate and the kids would feel, a bit more involved than they normally did. And so far, it was going great. They had found the perfect location. It was stunningly beautiful. I mean, it really felt like the best place to perform the ceremony. But it was kind of odd that when they got there, there was no other families there. I mean, they have this place to themselves, which was just crazy. But they thought, great, this is even better for us. This is going to be the perfect ceremony. So while Anna's husband finished prepping everything they would need, Anna hit record on the camera, and then Anna walked out from behind the camera, and you see her come into frame, and she walks over to her kids. And now her kids are going to be performing this ritual the same way Anna and her husband would be, and it's clear they're pretty nervous. Now, they've done this before, but still, this ritual is not very comfortable. It doesn't feel very good, at least in the moment. And so Anna knew this, and so she knelt down with her kids, and she kind of reassured them that they were brave, they were courageous, they could do this, and she was going to go first. And they could see that, once mom did it, they would know that they could do it too. And so at some point, after kind of giving her kids a pep talk, Anna stood up. She walked over to the area that was designated for this ceremony. And then as the camera's rolling, she stood there. She drew a cross on her chest. Then she stepped forward and kind of jumped feet first and then disappeared. 1 second passed with no sign of Anna. And that was okay. But then 2 seconds passed and there was still no sign of Anna. And then 3 seconds passed and still no Anna. And at that point, her husband and her kids began to scream. So what Anna and her family didn't understand, or at a minimum just did not fully appreciate, was that when they did this ceremony with their church every year, the church took a lot of effort to make sure the location they chose for the ceremony, that it was totally safe. And on top of that, they often had medical personnel on standby just in case. But Anna and her family had not done either of those things. The location they chose was no doubt stunningly beautiful, but the reason it was deserted is it was a terrible spot for this ceremony. And then also, they didn't have any medical personnel on standby. The ceremony that Anna and her family were taking part in is known as the Russian Orthodox Epiphany, and it's a type of baptism. Basically, people all over Russia at this time of the year will carve a cross-shaped hole in the ice over a body of water, and then one by one, they'll jump into the water and then emerge again, baptized, purified. And so Anna and her family had done that. They'd carved the cross in this frozen body of water. But the reason this spot was a terrible spot to do this ceremony and why it was totally deserted is because they had chosen a raging river. That yes, it's frozen, but underneath that river is still flowing, and it's a very deep river. And so the second Anna stepped into the water feet first, she got swept away. But they didn't have a way for her to reemerge. It's all frozen ice. And so the second she went under into the pitch black water, she was gone. And within a couple of seconds, her family is expecting her to come back up again, but of course she didn't. And so they began screaming, and Anna's husband actually leapt into the water, but he actually stopped himself really quickly because he felt that current pulling him. And so he got out, and very quickly, a search was launched for Anna, but there was no hope. They couldn't find her, and in fact, to this day, they still have not recovered her body.
Oh my God.
In case you haven't heard yet, our newest graphic novel.
Oh my God. Can you imagine the pain that Anna's children are, and husband are going through now because of this? Oh my God. Oh man. I pray for that woman. Rest in peace, Anna. I cannot believe that. All right. Let's do another one, shall we, with Mr. Ballin. Okay, here we go, guys.
Today, I'm going to tell you 3 stories, and at the end of each of them, I'm going to show you the haunting photo or photos that are famously associated with them. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, the next time you're at the Like Button's house, please secretly sneak into their fridge and replace all of their vanilla ice cream with mashed potatoes. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Mr. Walker. Number 3, locked in. Locked in, okay.
At 10 p.m. on January 31st, 2012, a 23-year-old man named Chen Rongyu walked into an internet cafe in New Taipei City, Taiwan. The cafe had a front counter where a cashier would check you in and sell you snacks and drinks. And then from where he was looking, behind the cashier were all these tables, these long rows of tables with different computer stations at them. And there was at least about 30 people already sitting behind each of these terminals, fully engrossed in whatever game or whatever they were doing on the internet. And not one of these people even looked up when Chen walked inside. I mean, nobody was interested in Chen. But for Chen, that was sort of part of the allure of this cafe. He got to, sit down and play his game and be totally left alone. And so Chen walked up to the counter and paid for some time. He also bought a soda, and then he walked around back. He found an empty computer, sat down, and immediately fired up his favorite game, League of Legends. League of Legends is a multiplayer online battle arena game that's extremely popular all over the world. And Chen took this game very seriously. He routinely would spend 8-hour-long marathon sessions at this internet cafe just playing League of Legends to try to level up and move up in the ranking system. And so today, that's what Chen was going to do. And so after the game was booted up, he immediately locked in and he was in his first battle. And then before long, hours had gone by and he hadn't even gotten up. And then eventually, a couple times he got up to get a soda refill and to get a snack. But I mean, he basically just all night gamed, just nonstop, periodically stopping to literally put his head down on the table and take a 15-minute power nap, only to get right back up and get back into the game.
Damn.
And so all night he's just on this game. By a little after noon on February 1st, Chen had been gaming nearly nonstop for 14 hours, which was long even by his standards. But he couldn't stop now. He was exhausted, but he was doing great. This is like one of the best sessions he had ever had. And right at that moment, he was in the middle of this really intense match where his team was about to get knocked out by this really good opponent. And if Chen could just lock in, they could pull out a win. And so Chen was super focused, leaned forward, hands flying across his keyboard and mouse, and he managed to dodge an attack. And then he geared up for the big strike. And right as he did, something went wrong. About 9 hours later, around 9 p.m., the cashier at this internet cafe had just finished giving another soda to one of the customers, and then they looked out and she noticed there was nobody else in line. Now, the job of this cashier was not just to check people in and give them snacks and drinks. It was also to keep the cafe clean and also, critically, to periodically make rounds and kick people out once their time had expired. Because oftentimes, a lot of these gamers would get sucked into their games, lose track of time, and basically end up playing for longer than they'd actually paid for. So the cashier grabbed her clipboard with all the information about each of the customers and how long they had paid for, and then she began making her rounds in the back. And part of it was she needed to speak basically to all the people that were there and kind of confirm that they were supposed to be here still. But as she walked into the back, per usual, nobody looked up at her. I mean, all these people at all their terminals were heads down, fully focused on their game. I mean, completely immersed. And so she began going, one person to the next, being like, hey, are you good? Did you pay for your time? Are you going to be here any bit longer? And a lot of these guys, they'd finally look up and be totally shocked she's even standing next to them because they weren't paying attention at all. But, one by one, she checked each of the monitors, and eventually she got to Chen. And when she got to Chen, Chen was focused on this game entirely to the point where when she said, hey, your time is up. You've been here for 24 hours. You paid for, 8 or 9 or whatever it was. Chen didn't even look up at her. I mean, nothing she could do could get Chen to even acknowledge her. He was so focused on the game. And so eventually the cashier, out of frustration, was like, hey, and she kind of tapped his shoulder, and Chen leaned back. And when he did, and the cashier got a good look at him, she screamed. It would turn out, until this very moment, Chen had gotten his wish. He had come to this cafe 24 hours earlier and been totally left alone. He got to exclusively just play his game in his own world. In fact, the whole time he was here, no one had even looked at him, because if they had, they would have seen something was horribly wrong. It was the cashier who walked over to him and tapped on his shoulder who noticed what was wrong. Here's what the cashier saw. This is a picture of Chen, and Chen is in full rigor mortis. Because 9 hours earlier, when he was in the middle of that really intense fight with that opponent who was about to beat Chen and his team, Chen, he got really excited and he was about to land that big strike that potentially could have been the blow that would have won the match. Well, he was so amped up that Chen had a heart attack and died. And for the 9 hours after he died, when he was still in the same position he was in playing the game, nobody noticed. He just sat there appearing to be fully alive, walked into the game like everybody else, but he was actually dead. And so it wasn't until the cashier tapped Chen on the shoulder and he rocked backwards, still in his gaming position, but because he's in rigor mortis, his hands kind of jutted out in front of him up into the air, that she realized he was actually dead. Chen's family would later say that he had pre-existing heart issues that very likely contributed to his fatal heart attack.
Jesus, Chen.
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. As the weather warms up and the days get longer, it can be exciting, but also kind of overwhelming. In the winter, we all kind of get to hibernate.
I want to stop right there for a minute. Oh my God, are you kidding me? And no one noticed this for 9 hours? Oh my gosh. They should have looked up at him and see what was wrong with them. Oh my gosh. That's ugh. Can you imagine not notice that you had a dead man, a dead guy, or a dead girl right there, right next to you playing, and when you're playing a video game or something like that? I mean, oh my gosh. That's
stay in our houses and kind of avoid the world. But now, with the days getting longer and sunnier and brighter and everybody's outside, there's like this societal push to get out there and be active and hit your fitness goals and be social and also clean your house. It's like, be the best version of yourself right now. And so, of course, every spring, right around this time, I start to feel really self-conscious because I see all my friends and family posting their amazing lives on social media, looking like they are absolutely becoming the best versions of themselves. And I feel like I'm not doing enough to compete with them. And so to me, it's really no wonder that statistically speaking, anxiety actually does spike in mid to late spring. Luckily, my sponsor, BetterHelp, is here to help. And their licensed therapists are ready to support you right now. The majority of BetterHelp members report reduced anxiety symptoms after only 6 weeks. And it's easy to start. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire, and then BetterHelp will pair you with a therapist in as little as a couple of days. Also, you can easily switch therapists at any time at no additional cost until you find the right fit. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Let BetterHelp help you rule your anxiety so it doesn't rule you. Click the link in the description below or go to betterhelp.com/Mr. Ballin for 10% off your first month of therapy. Okay, back to the stories.
good. Here we go. Number 2, the perfect shot. Okay.
On the afternoon of October 11th, 2023, a 48-year-old man named Samuel Gomez stood in the lobby of the Moxie Hotel in Portland, Oregon, talking to the concierge. Samuel had flown in from Phoenix earlier that morning because he was speaking at a conference in Portland later that week. But for now, he was just going to go out and enjoy the sights. And so he had asked the concierge to give him some local recommendations. The concierge named a few cool local places. Samuel thanked him, and then he headed out the front door onto the road. And as soon as Samuel was outside, he immediately heard this loud commotion happening right down the street. And he turned and looked in the direction, and he saw this kind of gaggle of people and cars sort of standing in what looked like a big circle around whatever was happening over there. Samuel couldn't tell what it was, but people were honking and people had their phones out filming sort of whatever was in the middle of the circle. And From the looks of it, it appeared there was at least one police officer in his car, sort of beginning to marshal the scene and block traffic. But, there was just this chaotic scene happening, and Samuel really had no idea what it was. But naturally, being a human, he was interested. He wanted to see what was going on. And so Samuel began walking down the road, and as he did, he pulled out his phone, opened up his camera, and began filming and taking pictures. And as he got closer to whatever was going on here, the cacophony of horns and people yelling and all the chaos just got louder and louder, and it still wasn't clear at all to Samuel what the heck this even was. And so he just continued to take photos and just kind of be an onlooker. And at some point, when Samuel got right up close and actually was standing right near that police officer blocking traffic, he happened to turn his phone and aim his camera at the police officer. And when he did, he took a photo. Here is the photo he took. As you can see, the police officer is aiming his gun directly at Samuel. And that's because this is not a police officer. Samuel just thought he was a police officer. When he looked down the road at this crazy scene, he saw this guy in a car who sort of appeared to be, maybe an undercover cop, sort of, in the right place at the right time, taking charge and handling whatever this was. When in reality, this man who's in this photo is a guy named Jeffrey Hammond, who had just been involved in a road rage incident, and he shot and killed a 47-year-old man named Ryan Martin. That was the scene that Samuel had walked out to. Jeffrey Hammond shooting and killing Ryan Martin. That's what everybody was reacting to. And so as Samuel walked down the road, not knowing that, he inadvertently stood right in front of the shooter, who was still sort of crazed, aimed his camera at him, right as Jeffrey Hammond swung his gun around and shot Samuel. So literally seconds after this photo was taken, Samuel got shot. Luckily though, Samuel would survive the shooting.
Oh, thank God.
As for Jeffrey Hammond, he was arrested and charged with murder. And as far as we know, he is currently in jail awaiting trial.
Why not attempted murder too? Number 1, the masterpiece. Okay.
On April 5th, 2018, a young man named Luis Hernandez sat inside of a small stone shack with a metal roof on a rural property in northern Venezuela. Luis was a painter, and for the last year or so, this shack had doubled as both his home and his art studio. And it was basically always a mess. There was dirty dishes and food everywhere, and all his paint supplies were scattered all over the ground. But the walls were all adorned with all of his beautiful and most prized possessions, his artwork. He mainly painted really dramatic-looking portraits in very bold colors. In fact, when he was actually doing his painting, when he was in the middle of the floor, right in the center of his shack, on one wall, there was this face of a man he had done, all in red. And then on the left, on the other wall, was this woman's face, all in blue, but with bright red lips. And these paintings were both so intense that at times, as he was doing his work, it sort of felt like they were both looking at him. But on this particular day, as Luis sat in the middle of his shack, working on his latest project, he put that weird thought out of his mind that, his paintings were watching him, and just focused instead on getting this done. He had one more beautiful portrait he was working on, and he took his paintbrush and he dipped it in the black ink, and he put the finishing touches on it. And when this portrait was done, Luis kind of sat back and took it all in, and he couldn't help but feel a bit emotional, because this project, it was different than any other he had ever done. He wasn't doing it for fun. He wasn't doing it for pay. He was doing it as a way to cope with a big crisis in his life. So this shack where Luis worked and lived, and also the rural property that it sat on, belonged to Luis's boyfriend, Lisandro Rosales Garcia. Lisandro and Luis had met about a year earlier when Luis was really down on his luck and was actually homeless, living out on the streets. But Lisandro had seen Luis and offered to let him come live in this shack on his property, which was out in the middle of nowhere. And Luis, who's got no other options, is like, awesome, yes, I'd love to do that. And so he moves out into the shack, and pretty quickly after moving in, Luis and Lisandro, they formed a more romantic relationship, and Luis was so happy. He felt like Lisandro was the one person who really understood him and truly supported his art. But then, about 2 months ago, Lisandro had just gone missing. The police were looking into it, but so far, Luis had not gotten any updates. And so Luis was handling this huge gap in his life now, the only way he knew how to, which was with his art. And so this latest project he had just finished was sort of like a tribute to his missing boyfriend. But as Luis put his brush down and stood up to admire his work, he suddenly heard voices from outside. Now, this was highly unusual because this property really was very remote. I mean, the only time Luis or Lisandro would see people here was if they invited them, and Luis had not invited anyone. But before Luis could even react to, these strangers on his property, those people outside began pounding on Luis's front door. And so Luis, he opened up the door, and standing there were all these police officers. And Luis's first reaction was, oh, they must be here to give me some updates about Lisandro's disappearance. But these police officers, they didn't give an update. Instead, they just pushed past Luis into the art studio and began scooping up all his paints and paintbrushes. And then at some point, one of the officers actually looked down and saw the final project that Luis had been working on, his tribute to his missing boyfriend. And when the officer saw that painting, he turned around, ran outside, and vomited. Here is a picture of that tribute. Now, at first glance, this piece of art is totally unremarkable. It appears to be some sort of stained glass with green leaves and some blue and red flowers. But when you consider the types of supplies that Luis used to make this particular piece of art, you'll realize how horrifying this image actually is. And it's what caused that officer to vomit. It would turn out Luis was not just a painter. He was also a serial killer. And what he would do is after he killed his victims, he would use their blood, their ashes, and their other body parts to paint all of his paintings. Now, at first, Luis and Lisandro were actually a happy couple. However, at some point in February of 2018, they got into some kind of fight, and Luis killed Lisandro and quickly began using his body parts to create this tribute to his boyfriend. If you look again at the tribute painting, all the red that is used is Lisandro's blood. And all the black that's used is Lisandro's ashes. All told, police would find the remains of at least 6 people on that property. They also found evidence that Luis was not just using their body parts to make art, he was also cannibalizing his victims. Luis was arrested and made a full confession. As far as we know, he is currently incarcerated in Venezuela.
Oh my gosh, that's even worse. That's oh god. Really. Oh, I'm gonna be sick on that one. Wow. Oh my gosh, that's just so wrong. Wow. 3 those 3 stories were disturbing. Oh my gosh. Wow. Using paint and using body parts as paint. Oh my god. That's gross, man. All right, guys, let's do another one, shall we? Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, start.
What's your favorite app?
Facebook. X Shorts.
What's that?
Sorry, guys. Hold on. Okay, here we go.
I'm going to share 3 stories that all have a haunting picture or video that is associated with them. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and super glue their eggs into the carton. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. On the evening of December 29, 1986, a California Highway Patrol officer named Craig Pyre drove his cruiser down Interstate 15 in San Diego, California. With him was an NBC News reporter in the back seat, and there was a cameraman in the passenger seat. They were filming a segment about highway travel safety that was set to air on the evening news later that night. Officer Pyre was following his typical patrol route, but after a few minutes, they passed by a sign that said Mercy Road. It was an exit. And at that point, Officer Pyre turned to the news team, pointed at Mercy Road, and said, "That's where they found the body." So a little more than 36 hours earlier, at around 4 a.m. the previous morning, a 20-year-old college student named Kara Knott had been found strangled to death in a creek right near the Mercy Road exit. Kara had been on her way home from her boyfriend's house when, for whatever reason, maybe car troubles or maybe she was trying to help someone, but she wound up in that cul-de-sac. And then while she was there, she clearly encountered someone dangerous who took her life. And so this was actually why the California Highway Patrol and NBC News were collaborating on this news segment, because Kara's killer was still not caught. And so the idea behind this segment was basically to tell drivers along this highway, like, how to stay safe while they were out there, especially if for whatever reason they had to stop somewhere along the highway, like what to do in that situation. And so as Officer Pyre passed by the Mercy Road exit and continued down Interstate 15, he turned to the news crew, and as they filmed, he began talking about the basics of highway travel safety. Specifically, he said, look, one of the most hazardous things that can happen to you beyond an accident on the highway is if you have some sort of car trouble that forces you to stop on the highway. Because once you stop, there's an inclination for a lot of people to want to leave their vehicle. But that's a very dangerous thing to do.
Anything could happen. Being a female, you could be raped, robbed if you're a male, all the way to where you could be killed.
Officer Pyre also warned people not to get into a stranger's car, because there was a running theory at this point that perhaps Kara had gotten into her killer's car. As this particular segment was filmed, the one you just watched, Officer Pyre was looking ahead, and he noticed there was a car pulled over on the shoulder of the highway with its hazards on. So he turned to the news crew and basically said, look, here's a chance for us to actually show the people in real time what to do in case your car breaks down on the highway. So he pulled his cruiser over right behind the stalled car, he got out, and then gestured for the news crew to come with him. Officer Pyre walked over to the passenger side door of this car, and through the open window, he asked the driver to get out and talk to him. The driver did, and as the camera rolled, Officer Pyre asked him to explain, what's going on here, what happened to your car. The driver said he had run out of gas and then gotten stranded on the side of the road. And then he had left his car and walked to a gas station to get a gas can, came all the way back, he put the gas into his car, but his car still wouldn't start. Now, at this point, Officer Pyre is realizing that this driver is doing basically exactly what he shouldn't be doing, according to the safety tips Officer Pyre had given. And so on camera, he basically says to this guy, do you understand how dangerous it is to have left your car like that and walked alone on this highway? Do you understand what a hazard that is? And the driver just kind of looked at him and shrugged like, yeah, I guess so. After that, Officer Pyre called the man a tow truck. His car was towed and the man was on his way. And Officer Pyre got back into the cruiser with the news crew and they carried on. After that, Officer Pyre and the news crew wrapped up filming. And then after he dropped them back off again, they told him what time to expect his segment to air on NBC that night. And sure enough, that evening, Officer Pyre was in front of a TV as the broadcast started. And when Officer Pyre's actual segment aired on TV, to him and to the California Highway Patrol, it went great. It was a minute and a half long. It sort of hit all the high points. It showed Officer Pyre, talking about how to be safe on the highway and talking to the stranded motorists. It kind of did exactly what they expected it to do. And when it was over, Officer Pyre clicked off the TV and didn't think much about it because it was not a big deal. It was just a basic safety video. And for the vast majority of other people who watched this clip live on TV, it really didn't stand out to them. Again, it was just kind of a routine police safety video. But there were a few people, when they watched this clip, that noticed something very specific. And within an hour of this clip airing on TV, those few people were calling the police in droves to tell them, we know what happened to Kara Knott. And the police would follow up on these tips. And sure enough, just over 2 weeks later, they had gathered enough evidence that they were able to arrest Kara Knott's killer. It would turn out all the clues the police needed to solve the Kara Knott murder case were right there in that 1.5 minute long video. Because what happened to Kara had almost happened to over 24 other women in San Diego. And those young women were the ones who saw the news segment when it happened live, and they noticed this particular detail that clearly telegraphed who Kara's killer was. They were the ones who called police. On the night of Kara's murder, December 27th, 1986, she pulled off Interstate 15 on the Mercy Road exit, and she came to a stop in that cul-de-sac. Now, we don't know exactly why she came to a stop in there, but either way, she was there, and that's where she encountered her killer. Now, the other 24 women who encountered the same person, the killer, they were terrorized and kind of tortured and held hostage for a couple of hours, but eventually were let go. But Kara wasn't. During her encounter, at some point, the killer clubbed her over the head and then strangled her to death with a rope. Now, the killer at first had gotten away with this until they were featured on that 1.5-minute long video. And some of those women who had survived their attack, they're watching the segment, and suddenly their attacker is on TV. Now, they had previously reported their attack to police, but to this point, nothing had been done. And now they're staring at, for sure, the person who attacked them, who's right on TV. And critically, as part of this segment, they're hearing about how this other young woman had been attacked and killed on this highway. And they're thinking, oh, this person did that to me. I barely got away. I bet they killed this girl. And on top of that, as they're watching the news, staring at their attacker, they can see there's a fresh cut over their eye. And so put that all together and they thought, boom, that's the person who killed Karen Otts. And sure enough, the police would follow up on these tips and they would confirm that the man in the video with the cut over his eyebrow was Kara's killer. And Kara's killer was none other than Officer Craig Pyre. Officer Pyre was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Since being incarcerated, he has gone up for parole 2 separate times and been rejected both times. However, he is up for parole again in 2027.
2027, huh? Well, hopefully he stays there.
Immerse yourself in the world through moisture with Dr. Squash.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Jeez.
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. This time of year, right after the holidays and the new year, can be pretty difficult. I mean, you just had all your family time and vacation time and downtime, and now you got to transition back to sort of like real adult life. And that can be hard. It's not out of the ordinary during this time of transition to feel kind of sad and lonely and even depressed. A therapist can really help you deal with that. Not only the immediate problem, which is the actual sadness and depression from the transitional period, but also they can help work with you to develop strategies for how to combat future issues, future transitional problems, whatever they are. And a great therapy option is BetterHelp. They are fully online and they're making therapy more comfortable, more convenient, and frankly, just easier. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire online, and then afterwards, you'll be matched with a therapist from their diverse network of over 30,000 plus licensed therapists in as few as just a couple of days. And you can easily switch your therapist at any time at no additional cost if it's not the right fit. BetterHelp makes sure their therapists are well qualified and their support team is always there to help you in case you have questions. The new year is a blank space for you to write a new, happy story. And BetterHelp makes it easy to get started. Start fresh any day of the year with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/Mr. Ballin to get 10% off your first month of therapy.
Number 2, now approaching.
Around 1 p.m. on November 28, 1979, a 52-year-old tour guide named Peter Mulgrew stood at the front of the cabin of Air New Zealand flight TE901. Out the window next to him, he looked out and he saw this vast white landscape reflecting the afternoon sun. And so he grabbed the microphone and announced to the 237 passengers that they were now flying over Antarctica. The passengers got really excited and immediately pulled out their cameras and began snapping photos left and right. And as you can see from some of the photos that they took, a lot of the passengers actually got up out of their seats and moved around to get the best angle of the ground down below. Now, on a normal commercial flight, that behavior would not be okay. You can't just, wander all around the cabin. You need to basically stay seated. But this was not a normal commercial flight. This was a sightseeing flight. Air New Zealand regularly took off from New Zealand and would fly people up over Antarctica, and their tour guide would point out a few landmarks down below, and then that flight would land back in New Zealand. That was the whole thing. It was just a chance to go out and see Antarctica and take photos. Peter had been a tour guide for this flight many times before, and so he knew what to expect. He not only knew kind of how passengers react, but he also knew exactly when to look out which side of the plane to get the best view. And so after a couple of minutes, he called out to the passengers, hey, if you look out the left side of the plane, you'll get a great view of the coast of Antarctica. And so all the passengers, they immediately get up and shift over to the left side of the plane, and they press their cameras up against the glass. They're taking photos. And then a couple of minutes later, Peter called out to the group again and said, okay, now look out the right side where you'll see Mount Erebus, this huge, stunning mountain. Now, Peter was accustomed to people gasping when they saw this mountain because it was so beautiful, so enormous. And as people piled up against the right side and began taking photos, that's what he heard. People were gasping. Then at the same time, the plane suddenly jolted hard, and one of those passengers on the right side took this photo. As you can see, there are black marks on the window, and these black marks are believed to be either engine oil or soot from Mount Erebus. Because Mount Erebus was not just some mountain. Mount Erebus was an active volcano, and the flight path of TE901 was supposed to have them going safely around Mount Erebus to get a nice full view of the volcano. But mistakes were made, and before the pilots could correct them, the plane flew directly into the volcano. And so this photo you're looking at almost certainly was taken literally at the moment of impact. A crash that resulted in 237 lives lost. The crash of flight TE901 was the worst aviation disaster in New Zealand history, and as a result, Air New Zealand no longer offers those sightseeing flights.
Damn.
Without the ones like you working tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. No matter your industry, Grainger's here for you with professional-grade supplies. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Number one, hot snow.
At 5:30 a.m. on July 16th, 1945, a 13-year-old girl named Barbara Kent was sleeping inside of a cabin in Ruidoso, New Mexico, where she was staying for a sleepover summer dance camp. And as she slept, suddenly there was this loud booming sound that literally shook her awake and actually caused her to fall out of her bed onto the floor. Barbara sat up feeling totally confused, and she looked around the cabin and she saw the 9 other girls that were also here for the sleepover camp. They too were wide awake, and some of them also had fallen onto the floor. And so the girls, they're all freaking out. They're looking at each other like, what's going on here? What was that? And as this kind of pandemonium is ensuing, their lead dance instructor came running into the cabin and told the girls that she thought one of the cabin's heaters had exploded and that potentially there could be a fire somewhere on the camp. And so all the girls, they're already totally panicked. Now they're getting really scared. And the instructor's just like, all right, girls, go outside, stand by the river. I'm going to go find wherever this explosion happened and make sure everything is okay. And so the girls, they were led outside, totally a mess. And they went and stood by this river near the cabin and waited for their instructor to go look around. And so Barbara and the 9 other girls, they're totally terrified, and they're standing by this riverbank, and they're kind of looking around the property, seeing if they can see smoke or fire, but they can't. And as they're standing there waiting for their instructor to come back, Barbara felt something hit the tip of her nose, and it was cold and soft. And she looked up and she realized it was snowing. But it's July in New Mexico. It should not be snowing. But sure enough, snow was coming down from the sky. And as the snow came down on Barbara, she looked at the other girls, and they too were looking up and putting their hands up and letting the snow hit them in the face. They couldn't believe it. I mean, this was like a totally rare weather event. And so a minute later, their dance instructor came back and told the girls that, she looked all over the camp and there did not appear to be a fire or an explosion of any kind, that everything seemed fine. They didn't know what that loud sound was, but, by all accounts, it seemed safe here. And so the girls were very relieved to hear this, but already their attention had completely shifted to the snow. I mean, again, it's July in New Mexico. There shouldn't be snow. And so the girls, they turned to their instructor and they're like, okay, well, now that it's safe, would it be okay if we put on our bathing suits and just went swimming in the river while it snowed on us? I mean, this is incredible. And the instructor, who to this point had really been focused on finding the fire and the hazard or whatever, now that she knew things were safe, she kind of took in the scene and also suddenly appreciated how unbelievable it was that there was snow coming down And so she told the girls, yeah, get your bathing suits, go swimming, enjoy this. This is totally like a once in a lifetime moment here. And so very excitedly, Barbara and the other girls ran back into the cabin. They changed into their swimwear. And then a moment later, they were out frolicking in the river as the snow fell on top of them. And for hours, they just played in the river and enjoyed the snow. And the snow was kind of building up on the riverbanks. And so some of the girls went over and scooped it up and rubbed it on their faces and, made snowballs. And they just had a great time. And at one point, the dance instructor came by and actually took a picture of Barbara, who was right in the middle of the river enjoying this bizarre scene. But eventually, despite how fun the snow was, the novelty of it all sort of wore off, and the girls got tired of swimming, so they changed into their regular clothes and went about their day. And over the course of the next few days, summer camp went as normal. The girls had a great time, and when summer camp ended, all the girls went home. Now, the girls never got an explanation for why it had snowed. They all just assumed it was some super rare weather event that they had been lucky enough to experience. Until 17 years later, when Barbara was 30 years old at this point, and she learned that all the other girls she had gone to the dance camp with had died. One by one, each of those girls were diagnosed with aggressive forms of cancer that killed them. Barbara was the only one who was spared. And she wouldn't get any clarification as to why that had happened until decades later in 2006, when Barbara was in her 70s, when the government finally came out and admitted the truth. It would turn out Barbara's dance instructor was correct in thinking there had been an explosion on July 16, 1945. But of course, it was not any of the cabin's heaters or anything local to the cabin or the camp. Instead, the explosion occurred 40 miles away at a US government testing site in the middle of the New Mexico desert. And the explosion that literally caused the girls to be dumped out of their beds was from the world's first ever atomic bomb being dropped. It was the Manhattan Project's Trinity test, a test that no civilians in the area had been warned about. And so after this bomb detonated, there was this nuclear fallout that rained from the sky on 500,000 people that lived within a 150-mile radius of the detonation site. And within those 500,000 people were those 10 innocent teenage girls at their dance camp. The snow that the girls played in was actually radioactive material from this nuclear fallout raining down from the sky that over the course of 17 years would give 9 of the girls various forms of cancer that would kill them. Here is the picture that the dance instructor took of Barbara posing in the middle of the river as the snow is falling all around her. As you can see, Barbara is smiling and looking up at the snow, not realizing it's literally going to kill almost everyone in that picture. As for Barbara, she did not die young. However, she would suffer from multiple cancers and illnesses, all associated with radiation exposure.
Damn. Wow. I mean, seriously? Government, hello, you're supposed to warn people if they are doing, if you're doing something like this. And now you killed you killed a lot of people because of this. Jeez. Oh my gosh. I mean, seriously. You would think that the government would be more smarter than this. All right, guys, we have enough time for one more, so let's get started. Let's finish this up. Let's finish this up strong, shall we? All right, guys, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Today's story is about a chance encounter between 2 men in Canada. Now, at first, these 2 men hit it off and became fast friends. But as time wore on, it became very clear that both men were keeping secrets from the other. And eventually, those secrets were exposed. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please reprogram the Like Button's TV remote so that every time they try to change the volume, it just turns off the TV. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
All right, let's do it. Mr. Ball. The contest winner.
One evening in late 2003, a 22-year-old man named Michael Bridges sat down in the stands of a professional hockey game in Calgary, which is a major city in Canada. And as he sat there staring out at the rink, waiting for the players to file in, he thought to himself how amazing it was that he was here right now. He couldn't believe how lucky he was to be here. So Michael lived about 700 miles away in a city called Brandon, which is also in Canada. And for the last year, Michael's life had gone really badly. He was struggling financially and in between jobs. He'd gone through a recent terrible breakup. A lot of his friends had sort of vanished from his life. And so for the most part, he was sort of sad and lonely all the time. But then he'd won a sweepstakes that he had only entered on a whim and gotten an all-expenses-paid trip to Calgary for this hockey game. And so it felt like finally something good was happening in his life. Michael was about to flag down a vendor and order himself a beer when this guy he didn't know, the stocky guy with a mustache, walked in and sat down right next to Michael. And before Michael could say anything, this guy looked at him with a big smile on his face and he said, "Man, I'm so excited to be here. I won this ticket in a sweepstakes." And Michael was like, "Dude, me too." And so right away, these total strangers just totally hit it off. And before long, they were chatting about their lives. And, Michael, who over the last year, most of his friends had sort of disappeared in his life, it was great to have a guy that just seemed to get him. And so the time flew by. And Brock must have felt the same way about Michael, because as the hockey game ended, Brock asked Michael if he wanted to, keep the party going and go together to a strip club right down the road. And Michael was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so the two new friends left the hockey game together, went to the strip club, and as soon as they got there, Michael began to notice something odd about Brock, or at least something he hadn't noticed before. And that was that even though Brock appeared to be very blue collar, sort of like Michael was, Brock appeared to have a lot of money. I mean, he was leaving these huge tips for all the bartenders, and he was paying for he and Michael's drinks round after round. Brock was paying for all of it. And then also, Brock had this huge wad of ones and bills that he was basically throwing at all the dancers. And Michael, who was caught off guard by this, gladly accepted Brock's generosity. I mean, at this point, given Michael's financial struggles, he could not have afforded even a normal night out, let alone a lavish one like this. And so as the two men stood at the bar towards the end of the night, Michael thanked Brock for making this such a fun night, and he said he really didn't want to leave and go back to his hometown of Brandon, 700 miles away, because he was having so much fun here with Brock. But when he said Brandon, Brock stopped and he's like, "Wait a minute, Brandon? I'm moving to Brandon for work." And when Michael heard this, he was ecstatic. I mean, he was thinking this was going to be a one-off thing, that he would likely never see Brock again, despite how cool this guy was. But now it seemed entirely possible that if they were living in the same town, they could be actual friends. And so Brock told Michael that, "Hey, if you help me find an apartment in your hometown once I move there, maybe I can repay the favor by helping you get some work." And so Michael, he took one last look at that big wad of cash in Brock's hand, and he looked up at him and he said, "Deal." A couple of months later, in early December of 2003, Michael rode in the passenger seat of Brock's car as they made their way down a road in Brandon. The two had just had lunch together, and Brock was driving Michael home when suddenly Brock's phone rang. And when Brock answered it, Michael could tell right away, just from the tone of Brock's voice, that he was speaking to his boss. So ever since that hockey game, Michael and Brock had become friends. Brock had moved to Brandon, and Michael had helped him find an apartment. And in exchange, Brock had made good on his promise and had helped Michael find some work. In fact, he had gotten him a few odd jobs with the company that he, Brock, worked for. However, these jobs were not what Michael expected them to be, based on, his first impression of Brock. In reality, he felt like these jobs were kind of shady. Brock had asked Michael to start delivering these packages all over town, but he warned Michael to never look inside of any of these packages. Now, at first, obviously, Michael had been very unsure about taking Brock up on these jobs. I mean, it was pretty clear that whatever Brock was doing was, questionable or maybe even illegal. Like, what's going on with these packages? But, Michael thought back to that huge wad of cash that Brock had at the strip club in Calgary, and it just seemed like he was throwing money around, and Michael wanted money like that too. And so he thought, what's the harm? And so ultimately, Michael agreed to deliver one of these packages, and when nothing bad happened, he began delivering more. Now, Michael still had no idea what he was actually delivering. He had heeded the warning and was not looking inside these packages. Instead, he had sort of accepted the shadowy, mysterious stuff that Brock was doing was just sort of part of being friends with Brock and working for Brock. And so he had just gone along with it. And also, Michael genuinely needed the money. He really couldn't afford to just stop working. So as the two men continued down this road in Brandon, Michael just continued to sit quietly in the passenger seat while he listened to Brock speak to his boss. And at some point in this conversation, Brock looked very resigned and just said, "Okay, I'll take care of it right now." Then Brock abruptly hung up, and without saying anything to Michael, he just pulled a U-turn and began speeding in the opposite direction. And then a couple of minutes later, Brock pulled into this parking lot of the seedy hotel. And then before Michael could ask, like, "What are we doing here?" Brock turned to him and said, "You stay here." And then Brock got out of the car and he marched over to the door of this motel and began to knock. And Michael, he's in the car watching this, having no idea what's going on. And he sees the motel room door that Brock knocked on. It suddenly opened, and there was this woman who was inside the motel. And from Michael's perspective, it seemed like she was very startled to see Brock. And then she began trying to shut the door on Brock. But Brock, he reached out and he began pushing on the door to keep it open. And the two of them began yelling at each other. And Michael, he can't hear what they're yelling about, but clearly, they're having some sort of heated argument here. And at this point, Michael began looking around, hopeful that nobody was witnessing this. I mean, they could get in some serious trouble here. And then Michael turned his attention back to Brock and this woman, and he watched as Brock raised his fist and punched this woman square in the face. And she instantly crumpled to the ground. And Michael, he has no idea what to do here. And so he just sat there as Brock climbed on top of this woman who's laying on the ground. And he began repeatedly punching her over and over again until Michael could see blood all over her face. And then Brock, who seemed totally unfazed, slammed the motel room door and calmly walked back to the car, hopped in the driver's seat, and drove off without saying anything to Michael. And Michael just sat quietly for this ride. He really had no idea what to even say. Now, he already knew that Brock must be involved in some sort of criminal enterprise, and in virtue of Michael delivering those packages for him, he was also involved in whatever this organization did. But up until this point, up until seeing this beating take place, Michael had sort of assumed that whatever Brock was involved in couldn't be that big of a deal. I mean, certainly they weren't hurting people. But now Michael realized he had been terribly wrong. Finally, Brock pulled up in front of Michael's house, and for the first time, he spoke. He turned to Michael and he said, "Don't tell anyone what you saw." And Michael just nodded his head and said, "Yeah, I won't." And then Michael got out of the car and he rushed inside his house.
All the bullies wanted to sleep with Quinn's girlfriend, Jennifer. They questioned his manhood and even...
Sorry, guys, another ad.
Thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring today's video. I found out last month that I was still paying for a subscription to a streaming service that I signed up for while we were on tour last year. I had signed up for this because and when you looked at the caller ID, your savings grow. You can edit, pause, or withdraw at any time. Take control of your finances today. Go to rocketmoney.com/MrBallin to get started for free. Again, that's rocketmoney.com/MrBallin. Okay, back to the story. About a week later, Michael was at his home when his phone rang. And when he looked at the caller ID, he saw it was Brock. And at first, Michael couldn't help but feel like he didn't want to pick up the call, but he knew he would have to. Despite what had happened the previous week at the motel, Michael had not said anything to anyone. However, being loyal to Brock did not make him feel any better about it. In reality, Michael felt like at this point, he was in too deep with Brock, and he had no idea how to get out again, even though at this point he kind of wanted to. But for now, Michael had made the conscious decision to simply act like everything is the same, everything is normal, so he didn't raise any red flags with Brock. And so he ultimately picked up the phone. Brock didn't say hello or ask Michael how he was doing. Instead, he just told Michael that he had another delivery for him if Michael was still committed to this job. Now, Michael knew the right answer here would be to turn this down and not continue to go down this rabbit hole and get deeper and deeper in with Brock. But at the same time, Michael was worried if he refused this job, that he might be put in danger. Like, he saw what Brock was capable of. Is that going to happen to him if he turns this down? And then on top of that, Michael needed the money. And so after a tense silence, Michael told Brock that, yes, I'm still committed and I will do this delivery. Brock said that was very good. And he also told Michael that he and the boss were very impressed with Michael's silence. And then Brock hung up. Now, Michael did appreciate the compliment, but at the same time, it really did not change his situation at all. I mean, he was still in way too deep here and didn't know what he was going to do. And so reluctantly, he grabbed his keys and headed out to his car to go pick up this next package. 2 months later, in early February of 2004, Michael and Brock sat inside of a diner in Brandon eating a meal together. Things at this point had basically gone back to normal. Michael was regularly delivering packages for Brock, and the two of them were meeting for meals like this fairly often, where Brock would always foot the bill. But today, as Michael sat there staring at Brock, he could tell something was different. Brock seemed really agitated, like something was on his mind. He kept tapping his hand and kind of fidgeting in his seat. And eventually, Michael asked Brock, like, "Hey, are you okay?" And to Michael's surprise, Brock kind of lit up. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm okay. In fact, things are more than okay. I actually have an offer for you that could potentially change your life." Brock again told Michael that he and the boss were seriously impressed with Michael's work so far. Not just the fact that he kept silent about the motel incident, but also they knew Michael clearly had not looked inside of any of those packages. And so collectively, this proved that Michael was dependable and loyal. And so he told Michael that what he wanted to do was introduce Michael to the boss, because he thought maybe the boss would take a liking to Michael and move him up in the organization. Maybe give him a more managerial role like Brock's, where the role was more prestigious and had more responsibility, but critically came with higher pay. After hearing this, Michael felt both excited and nervous. He was excited because he wanted nothing more than to make the kind of money that Brock did. And after working with Brock now for several months, Michael had become kind of desensitized to violence and danger. He realized he could put his morals aside if it meant he would never have to be financially insecure ever again. But the thing that made Michael nervous was meeting the boss. I mean, he really didn't know much about who this guy was. All he knew is he was perfectly prepared to resort to violence if people wronged him. And so Michael knew how critical it was to stay on this guy's good side. But as all these conflicting thoughts were swirling around Michael's head, Brock said something else. He said before he would actually take Michael to meet the boss, Michael had to pass one more test. Michael would have to prove that he was capable of more than simply delivering packages and keeping secrets. Basically, he needed to prove that he could be as cutthroat and brutal as Brock was. After saying this, Brock just kind of leaned back and stared at Michael, studying his reaction. And at first, Michael really didn't even know what to say or do. He was like, okay, is Brock expecting me to come up with, some sort of way that I can demonstrate this? Do I need to come up with a test myself and do it? Or is Brock about to give me some assignment? Like, what's going on here? But then, before Brock could say anything else to clarify this whole situation, Michael had this epiphany. He suddenly realized that he already had the proof he needed to demonstrate to Brock and to the boss that he could basically handle anything they threw at him. Before meeting Brock, something truly awful and just totally messed up happened in Michael's life. And Michael had persevered his way through it. And so Michael was thinking to himself, if he just told the story of what happened to Brock and to the boss, they would be convinced that he was their guy. And so feeling very confident, Michael looked Brock right in the eye and he told him about his past. And as he told the story, Brock's eyes went wide. And by the end of the story, when Michael finally finished up, Brock just said, okay, yeah, you're ready to meet the boss. The meeting with...
Tired of wearing the same outfit every day? The same boring, unpredictable outfit? Then you need Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix makes it super easy to update and refresh your look.
The meeting with the boss was scheduled for a few days later. And on that day, Michael showed up to this fancy hotel in a nearby city. And when he walked into the lobby, he saw Brock was sitting there waiting for him. When Brock saw Michael, he smiled and stood up, gestured for Michael to come over, and then the two of them walked upstairs to a particular hotel room. But when Brock unlocked the hotel room door and the two men went inside this lavish suite with this gorgeous living room and an amazing view, Michael looked around and realized it was empty. And he said to Brock, like, where's the boss? And Brock said, the boss doesn't wait for anyone. People wait for the boss. And so just sit down, he'll be here soon. And so Michael said, okay, and he took a seat and tried to stay calm. But in reality, he was very nervous. I mean, all this cloak and dagger stuff was really putting him on edge. He also knew he had to impress the boss when he got here, because if he did, he would have like this new lease on life, this big promotion. He'd be getting paid so much money. But if he didn't, if he failed to impress the boss, not only would he potentially be out of a job and back to sort of poverty, but also he could be in real danger here. And so as Michael is sitting there showing all the signs that he's totally nervous, Brock, who was in the room, just kind of standing there, looked over and could sense, his friend clearly is on edge. And so he said, "Hey, Michael, here we go. Why don't you just run me through your story one more time, like a dry run, before you meet the boss? Get yourself ready." And so Michael, who at this point was so anxious, he was happy to be doing anything other than just sitting there quietly, quickly agreed to the idea and went through his story one more time. And right as he finished his story, there was a knock on the door. And so Brock said, "Okay, he's here. Are you ready?" And Michael's like, "Yeah, I'm ready." And so Brock walked over to the door, took one more look at Michael, opened it up, and when Michael looked outside and saw who was out there, he knew immediately he had made a terrible mistake. It would turn out the last several months of Michael's life was one big lie. That sweepstakes that Michael had won that got him the tickets to the game in Calgary, that wasn't real. Somebody had set that up just so Michael could meet Brock. Those packages that Michael was delivering for Brock, they were not sensitive. It was just packages that contained flour, like cooking flour. And that woman that Michael watched Brock beat up at the motel, she was acting, and so was Brock. Nobody got hurt in that entire altercation, and the blood that Michael saw on her face, well, she had blood capsules hidden in her mouth that she popped to make it look like she actually got beat up. However, there was one thing that was absolutely true about the last few months of Michael's life, and that was that Brock really was involved in a secretive organization, and Brock really did want to bring Michael inside of it. It's just that the organization was not the criminal enterprise that Michael thought it was. Instead, it was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And Brock was an undercover officer running an elaborate sting designed entirely to get Michael to confess to his crimes, which he did while secret cameras inside of that hotel room recorded every single word he said. Michael's crime was murder. 2 years earlier, his girlfriend, Erin Chorney, had tried to break up with him. And he'd been so mad about it that he attacked her, wound up strangling her until she fell unconscious, and then he drowned her in the bathtub. And so this was the story he told Brock and intended to tell the boss to convince them that he was their guy, that he was tough and could do anything they wanted. He basically was telling them, "Hey guys, I'm literally a murderer." And so when they heard that knock on the door in the hotel room and Michael turned, expecting it to be the boss, well, instead, he saw a whole bunch of police officers coming into the hotel room to arrest him for that murder that he confessed to. Erin's body was ultimately recovered from the dump site where Michael had left her, and she was given a proper burial. As for Michael, he was convicted of her murder and sentenced to life in prison.
Wow. Wow. Whew. Talk about going deep undercover. Holy cow. Way to go, Brock. Man. You had me going, dude. Man. Whew. Good grief. Man, oh man, guys. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. That's got to be one of the most unbelievable things I've ever heard. What a story that one was. The others were all right, but this one takes the cake. Oh my gosh. Wow. Man, I thought he was not, wow. I thought that was, I didn't even think that was an undercover operation, but now I do. Holy cow. What, man, you even had me going, wow. That's how Mr. Ballin works, guys. He is the best at doing these stories. Well, guys, that will wrap it up. And and I hope you all enjoyed this. I mean, I certainly did. I'm happy to introduce to you all these videos. And hopefully, we'll do this again next time. And also, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And also, prepare for Past Sins coming up soon, the next episode of it. Stay tuned for the next episode of Sonic Saddle, the next part of episode 2 of Sonic and Saddle in Equestria, part 2, Return of Nephilus the Dark. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. So until then, this is Robinson saying so long. Until next time, guys. See ya.